All gas, no brake.
And now we have liftoff. Welcome into the Now We Have Liftoff New York Jets podcast. I am your host, John June, and of course, on this lovely, well, you'll be listening to this by the time you hear this, it'll probably be Saturday, but this lovely Monday evening, my guy, Frank Piccolo. Frank, I'm all over the place today, man. What's up?
I don't blame you, bro. We got all this training camp news. We're going to be breaking down LBs. I broke out my CJ Mosley stealth black jersey. We're ready to rock and roll, my man.
Oh no, I pulled a Frank. I was talking on mute. Oh man. But like you said, training camp, linebackers, got to get into that. But we got to talk about the first important news item that we couldn't talk about, that I was freaking out about, and Frank wouldn't freak out about until I got Frank to freak out about it. The Zach Wilson has signed his contract. And that's important, right? Because we said that last time we were on here, we wouldn't worry about it if he had signed it before, the start of training camp. Well, we had 2 training camp practices, and I was freaking out. Not because necessarily in the grand scheme of things are these 2 practices going to really, have an impact on Zach Wilson and how his career turns out? Most likely not. But it's, as a Jets fan, as fans of this team, and obviously seeing what the moves that they've made, and obviously they spent the second overall pick on Zach Wilson. You want that guy to be there because it just adds to the excitement. And we're just looking at all these. I was telling Frank, I'm seeing all these highlight videos of other teams at training camp practice, and you're not seeing anything out of the Jets. So, Frank, what are your thoughts on getting QB1 back in the building and out there for training camp?
I think it's important to get that rapport, start getting that rapport with his wide receivers, because this is going to be obviously the first year in the system. He's going to be a rookie, so he's got to get a rapport with everybody. But I wasn't freaking out until I found out that Joey Bosa's agent that he has fired was Zach Wilson's agent, and that saga went on like weeks and weeks into the season. And once I found that out, I was like, I really hope this doesn't drag out as long as that dragged out.
Yeah, that was another thing. But I mean, I knew that wouldn't get to that point. Obviously, they're in a negotiation. One side has to give something. The other side's, one side's going to have to give to get something. And so, I think that ultimately it went down as we thought it would. It just missed a couple of days, nothing really significant. But the thing I thought that was important, and I noted this to you, Frank, when we talked about it, was it's impossible to evaluate anybody on this roster outside of like maybe a run game situation when you have James Morgan and Mike White throwing the football to these to these receivers. I mean, every tweet from, DJ Bieniemy or, all these other beat writers was that, oh, there goes an underthrown pass to Corey Davis. And it's like, you can't even evaluate the corners. You can't evaluate the receivers. You can't even evaluate the offensive line because maybe the quarterback's holding the ball too long. He's not checking out of the right play, into the right play. So that was my biggest concern, was it's just like, you're basically wasting 2 days of practice because you can't really evaluate anybody.
Yeah, but they did get to work on the run game, which was good. Like you did hear that Vera Tucker and Becton on that left side were performing well, opening up holes for Michael Carter and LaMichael P. Ryan and Tevin Coleman and the likes.
Yeah, and I'm glad you talked about the offensive line because that's where we're going to go next as we, talk about training camp and all the news that's taken place thus far. And we've got an interesting battle going on in the trenches, man. I mean, Mekhi Becton, Carl Lawson, they've been going at it apparently in camp. Carl Lawson's been giving it to Mekhi a little bit. And, Robert Saleh said, hey, in these situations, the offensive player is going to be at the disadvantage because, there's no pad. So you can't really, you can't grab or hold, obviously within the allowable zones of the shoulder pads. But it's harder to get your hands on these defensive players, and so that you can actually block them in these situations when you have no pads. And so Carl Lawson, Robert Saleh described him as short, sawed off, and has this combination of speed and power that is unlike many pass rushers that Mekhi Becton will see this season. So Mekhi Becton also referred to it as iron sharpening iron. And so I think that's going to be huge. What are your thoughts on this battle we got going on in the trenches, Frank?
Yeah, you beat me to the punch on that. I was just going to say that iron sharpens iron, but it's twofold, right? Number one, it's going to make Mekhi better. That's number one. But also, it's good to see because I think Mekhi was one of the better left tackles last year. So when you look at it, if Carl Lawson's doing that to one of the better tackles in the league, what's he going to do on a daily basis? And if that's the case, if he's going to do that, you're going to have to slide protection to over to him. So you should open up some rushing lanes for JFM, for Quinn Williams. Like this right here, this news has got me super amped, and I'm ready, bro. I'm ready for all of it.
Yeah, man, and I know we talked about the D line last week in our D line breakdown. So if you haven't listened to that yet, or you haven't watched it on YouTube, make sure you go check that out. And also while you're there, just make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit the notification bell so you can get those notifications. Or if you just listen to us on podcasts, you can subscribe to us there after that plug. But anyway, Carl Lawson, this defensive line, they've been balling in camp. Sheldon Rankins, he talked about, he used some expletives, but he said that, this defense is all about, getting 3 yards in the backfield and just effing stuff up, for a lack of better terms. But, Sheldon Rankins talked about this D line and how it could be even better because we don't even have Quentin Williams there yet. Right now, he's dealing with a foot injury. They say he should be back when they hold joint practices against the Green Bay Packers. So I'm excited about this D line as a whole. And it's interesting because obviously we know they can be we're expecting them to take a step up as a pass unit, but we know that they can be a strong run unit. And so when you hear things like Michael Carter and LaMichael Pirine and, Tevin Coleman, Ty Johnson, all these guys are looking good in camp, and that the running game looks real good. How do you feel about that, Frank? And what are your thoughts there?
Well, I think we both thought that Michael Carter fit perfect into this type of offense, right? It's interesting to see that LaMichael Pirine is fitting good in this offense. Now, is that a product that the Jets revamped their offensive line by signing Moses and drafting Elijah Vera Tucker? Possibly. But they're running well against a defensive line that is pretty darn good in my opinion. So that's some good news.
Yeah, definitely. Harrison Glazer had put out an interesting tweet the other day about how the breakdown of this running game could go, and he said that the no running back on the Jets would have more than 1,000 rushing yards, but that the team, as the running backs as a whole, would have somewhere over 1,500. My projections have them at somewhere over 1,780 in terms of rushing yards, and I got some pushback on that because I put the rush attempts out there. I had the running backs getting for like 388 rush attempts, and that came out to like 4.5 yards per carry. And so there was a couple tweets on there, a couple replies saying, "Hey, you think this team could get 4.5 yards per carry?" And I actually think that they can, because you look at this team, you look at the way this improved offensive line, this outside zone run scheme, which if you look at the Mike Shanahans, the Kyle Shanahans, these running backs typically have a yards per carry anywhere between 4.8 to like 5.5 even sometimes. So, we've seen that in this offense. I think you've got some good backs here. Michael Pirine, somebody that obviously, if listeners of this show know, I have not been a huge fan of. If you listen to me on Fantasy Football Diagnostics, I'm not a huge fan of him in the fantasy community either. I wasn't a huge fan of him as a prospect. But the running back position is a position where all you have to do is get what's blocked. Everything after that is on you as an athlete and as a prospect. And if Lamichael Pirine can come in here and get what's blocked, then he's doing his job good enough, right? In this, especially within this offense, And so my qualms, and I kind of guess I made it a little personal about Michael Pirine because I felt like he should not have been drafted where he was drafted. Like, just to think that we got Michael Pirine and Michael Carter in the same round of two separate drafts. Yeah, I mean, I'll take this to the grave. Michael Carter is the better player, but I just don't think Michael Pirine necessarily was the kind of player you should draft in the 4th round. I thought maybe he was like a 6th round pick when you really look at it. But what are your thoughts there, Frank? I know you had made a statement earlier in the year about Michael Pirine. Are you retracting a retraction?
Yeah, I think I got to retract the retraction. I previously said that Michael Pirine could possibly be the key to the offense, and I said, well, it's probably going to be closer to Trayvon Wesco. And I think both statements can be true. Like, if Trayvon Wesco can't play fullback, it's going to be tough sledding. But I just felt the way that Michael Pirine runs the ball, because he's more of a north-south runner compared to the other running backs. I know Ty Johnson runs that way also, one cut and go. But, Connor McGovern talked about how this offensive line fits this wide zone blocking scheme because they're more of an athletic offensive line. Yeah, they got a bunch of big guys, but they're big guys that can move. Like, you look at Mekhi Becton's combine and how he ran the 40. It's ridiculous. A guy that big can move that quick. So, and it also, this wide zone makes a natural cutback lane. So for guys like Pirine and guys like Michael Carter and even Coleman, that have been in this similar scheme where they see that, they cut and they just hit it and they go. And now when you do that, now you got to bring a safety into the box, and now that should open up the passing lanes. That's something the Jets didn't have under Adam Gase and even Todd Bowles to an extent.
Yeah, I mean, they haven't really had a good running game since like Chris Ivory and Bilal Powell in 2015. So, I think, you really look at, so I do understand what you're saying about Pirine. I still won't back the take. I will not co-sign the take that he's the key to the offense, because
why are you hating so bad?
It's a combination of things. I don't like the player, and I love Michael Carter. So,
but I'm not arguing that Michael Carter is not the better player, but he could be kind of like what the Giants had with Brandon Jacobs and Ahmad Bradshaw, like that thunder and lightning package.
But I don't think Pirine's even close to Brandon Jacobs. Like, I get what you're saying. If you look at him within the backfield, he has a different body type and composition than some of these other guys, but that doesn't make him one of the bigger, more physical running backs. It just makes him one of the bigger, more physical running backs in this backfield. And so, I mean, one of the things that we've seen is that apparently this 2 years in a row, Michael Pirine has some wheels. So he can get out in the open field, he can get that cut, and he gets out there. So I'm excited. One thing we hadn't seen at all really was Michael Pirine in the preseason, and we didn't see him really get much work. And when we did see him, he didn't really impress all that much. But again, no one really did for the New York Jets on offense last year. So I'm excited to see, all these running backs in football. We get that August 14th, which is a Saturday. So we'll have to wait one more full week before that happens. But Frank, let's talk about another offensive player that's looking good, and that's our guy, man, Elijah Moore. So, apparently my man has been balling in camp. I mean, everyone, it's not even just the plays he's making on the field. It's just the way that they talk about him. Robert Saleh, head coach Robert Saleh, called him an old soul, said that he, just from the way he prepares, the way he studies, the way he takes care of his body, the way he practices, the way he takes every rep. And just to hear that about a kid that we know is just so physically talented, right? Like you watch Elijah Moore, you watch the speed and the explosiveness with which he plays. You watch the route running, you watch the hands, you watch how he makes moves in the open field. And then to know the kid the player and to know how coaches feel about him and how teammates feel about him. We referenced the AJ Brown video a few times. But we know how they feel about how all these people feel about him. That just gives me so much confidence that this kid is going to be a real player for the New York Jets.
Yeah, and it's crazy, right? When you think of like these big time receivers, you think of divas, right? And you don't get that with Elijah Moore. You don't get that feeling. Like you get that football means everything to him. Like he's gonna do all the little stuff. And I think that's what makes a good football player is the guy that's not afraid to do the work when nobody's watching, and that's gonna make all the difference when all the eyeballs are on you.
Absolutely, man. And he's got a good group of veterans to learn from in Corey Davis and Jamison Crowder, who apparently, by all counts, seem to be locked in right now as starters for the New York Jets. And so, according to DJ Bieniemy, I just read an article of his on the New York Daily News. He said that seems that Corey Davis and Jamison Crowder again locked into those spots, but the competition on the outside seems to be between Elijah Moore and Keelan Cole. And so Keelan Cole has been good. He's been trying to stave off the rookie for as long as he can, but DJ Bieniemy thinks that Elijah Moore he's been too good to hold off as a starter. So he thinks that at some point he will see the field. And so Cole has still been running ahead of another second round receiver for the New York Jets, another second round Joe Douglas receiver. And I'm obviously talking about last year's second round pick in Denzel Mims, who's been quite, he's been down and up. He's been a little underwhelming through, the first week of camp. So apparently Mims, there was a report that got everybody all in a tizzy when he was apparently working with the threes, Frank, in camp. And so, there was a report today that he worked with the ones. What are your thoughts, Frank, about Mims and his ability to climb the depth chart this year?
It's going to be tough, I think. Saleh and LaFleur are really high on Cole. Like, even when they go to those twin sets, I think you're going to see Keelan Cole get a lot of those more reps. I just think that Keelan Cole right now is a more polished receiver. Saleh said the other day that Mims was battling a illness during OTAs, so he's working his way in. We said it when we broke down the wide receivers that he came from this air raid offense in Baylor, so it's probably going to take him a little bit of time. I think the one thing that will help him is that he's an exceptional blocker in the running game. So if he could show that during the preseason and in practice, that might help him be able to see some reps on the field.
Yeah, Mims is definitely a guy that obviously, like you talked about, he's so good as a blocker. I think he also has some traits that fit well into what you would try to do. I mean, a receiver like him who's good as a blocker, that allows you to get into the play action game. And with a receiver, again, like Mims, who has length and speed to get down the field, that fits really well into your play action game. And so I think it's going to be hard to keep Mims off the field, but I don't, again, it's easy for me to say that from here prognosticating, but I'm not in meetings. I'm not on the staff. Like, I don't know why there's a reason why he was running with the threes. And there's a reason why it took him to this point to really get reps with the ones. And so until we really know what that reason is, I'm not going to be too bullish on Mims. I just know I'm not going to necessarily give up. And I think to your point, right, like Keelan Cole is a guy that they trust, and Mike LaFleur talked about that. That hey, Keelan Cole is a guy he knows exactly where he has to be, and he knows exactly when he has to get there. And I'm excited about this receiving core as a whole. It's probably the best supporting cast that a quarterback in green and white has had since Mark Sanchez back in 2010, when he was surrounded by like Santonio Holmes, Braylon Edwards, Dustin Keller, LaDainian Tomlinson, Sean Green. Like, that was a really good skill group for Mark Sanchez, and this one doesn't while it doesn't come close, it's pretty good. I mean, the Brandon Marshall, Chris Ivory, Eric Decker one was pretty good.
I
They
don't
try.
know. I think this might be close, bro. This
No, I
might be
mean,
close.
the thing is those receivers. I mean, you had a 1,500-yard Brandon Marshall and a 1,000-yard Eric Decker. Both of them had 12 or double-digit touchdowns. I think Decker had 12 and Marshall had 15. Like that was a that was a really good year from
I
those.
think it's going to depend on how dynamic Elijah Moore can be this year.
Yeah, I mean, it'll definitely, but I don't think there's not a receiver here. They'd be lucky to get that combined, this receiver group, that total that Brandon Marshall and Eric Decker got back in 2015. Plus, on top of that, Chris Ivory was like, I think 3 yards short of 1,000 yards. Bilal Powell had like 800 yards from scrimmage when you combine his rushing and his receiving. So 2015 was actually a pretty good year when I'm sitting here thinking about it offensively. But back to the topic at hand, Dustin Keller was pretty good in his heyday for the New York Jets before essentially blowing his knee out. And we had high hopes for a New York Jet tight end and Chris Herndon, but seems like he has been getting some, his reps with the ones have been cut down a little bit as Ryan Griffin and Tyler Croft run ahead of him a little bit more. There were reports today that they were working some 12 personnel. All three of those guys mixed in a little bit. I think at this point you'd like to see Herndon be the bona fide starter at that position, but it doesn't seem like that's happening right now. What are your thoughts for the tight end position and Herndon specifically?
I don't think Herndon's long for the green and white. You kind of just see the writing on the wall. I don't know how much burn he's going to get, but there's a reason why they brought Croft in. And, Croft wasn't tearing it up last year, but I don't think when LaFleur turned on the tape from last year that he was impressed by Herndon. We both weren't impressed by Herndon last year. Like we talked about it, we don't know if it was a product of Gase's offense or maybe Herndon, for whatever reason, is just having trouble grasping these types of offenses. Maybe when there's other options and Herndon knows that he's not getting the ball, he just doesn't try as hard. I don't know. I'm just trying to come up with reasons why he's not performing.
Yeah, I honestly don't know. It's mind-boggling, especially when you consider his rookie year, how how good he was. But then we also maybe have to realize that his rookie year he was the only thing available there, so they had no point, no. They had no choice but to involve him in the offense because there was literally no receivers. I remember the Minnesota game. Was it the Minnesota game or the Chicago game where our starting receivers were like Deontay Burnett and somebody else that's not even in the league anymore because there was nobody to play that game. And so yeah, we'll see how the year progresses, but we spent all this time, Frank, talking about offense. We talked a little bit about defense, talked a little bit about that D line, but now it's time to talk about the linebackers, man. Those LBs, and you've got your Chris Herndon or CJ Mosley jersey on, and so obviously that's what we're gonna lead with. The lead man in the linebacker room for the New York Jets, CJ Mosley came over from Baltimore 2 years ago, has basically only played one game for the New York Jets, one and a half. There was that New England game that he played for a little bit, was mostly banged up. But he says that he's tired of seeing the Buffalo highlights. He says he's tired of seeing them. Those are the only highlights they really ever play. Obviously, because those are the only highlights he has in the New York Jets uniform. And so he's excited to put some new ones on the screen on film. And so he's coming here playing this Robert Saleh defense. He's going to move to a traditional 4-3 middle linebacker as opposed to what he's been used to as a 3-4 inside linebacker. And CJ Mosley's a veteran. He's 7 years in the NFL now. He talked about that as well, how he's got to be the veteran in this room. And, he looks back to his time in Baltimore, some of the veterans that took care of him and brought him along. So he's definitely going to pay that forward. But this is a guy, he's very instinctual. He studies the tape, and it shows when he plays. And he's the conductor out there for this defense. I mean, it was very evident, back in that game against Buffalo 2 years ago. The moment he got out, like the defense was just completely, they couldn't adjust, they couldn't make any checks. And so CJ Mosley, I expect him to play a similar role here. I'm expecting him to bounce back in a major way. I mean, there was a time where CJ Mosley was talked about as a top 4, top 3 inside linebacker in the NFL. I mean, his name was right up there with the Luke Kuechly's of the world. And so I think he gets close to that. I don't think he's going to get back to that. Obviously, you got some guys like Devin White, and even Levante David is still really good. There's a Patrick Queen's coming up in Baltimore as well. There's a bunch of good linebackers throughout the league. And so CJ Mosley, to me, if he can get back into that top 8 range, I think that the New York Jets defense will be very, very grateful for that.
Yeah, and CJ talked about that, John. He talked about how people forget his name and, forget how good he was. And CJ, since he came in the league, has always been a favorite of mine, just the way he played linebacker. Me and you both played that inside linebacker role. And I think this 4-3 defense is really going to suit him well, where he could play sideline to sideline, use that intelligence that he has. Like when you talk about CJ, and what makes CJ good is how he could diagnose a play and be in the right spot to make a play, be it pass, be it run, whatever it is. He's that complete linebacker. He got tuteled under Ray Lewis. That was one of his mentors when he first came into the league. And I think the knowledge that he took from that and bring it over here, I think that's going to be great. I look at CJ like a free agent signing, because he only played a game and a half for us 2 years ago. He opted out last year with COVID-19 because he wanted to keep his family safe. I just think that, this is where I disagree with you a little bit. I think he could be that top 3, top 4, top 5 type of linebacker when all said is done. When you talk about the totality of this defense with Lawson and Quinnen, if they're able to eat up some blocks for these linebackers, CJ should wreak havoc.
Yeah, I definitely look. I'm not going to disagree and say that it's impossible that he could hop back in that top 3. It could just take a ridiculous year by him. He could have one of those years because he's that caliber of player. He's that good at that position. And I know people balked at the money that he's made, and obviously the amount of games that he's played. You could make that argument, but overall, this is a good player who, even at the time that they signed him to that ridiculous deal, like you could make an argument that he's probably worth it. So, I mean, just from what he brings from a character standpoint, what he adds to your defense, I mean, obviously we saw what he did against Buffalo. I keep referencing it. Sorry, CJ. But, just the kind of player that he's been over the years. He makes those game-changing plays. And maybe that's not the kind of player that you sign to a team that was like 4-12 or 5-11, whatever the Jets were when they signed him. And maybe he's a player you sign to a team that's like 9-7 or 10-6, and you want to get over that hump and add to your defense. So I could definitely see that argument. But a player who's also been added to this team, you refer to CJ Mosley as a free agent signing. This player actually is a free agent signing. He was the first player the Jets signed actually when free agency began. The first player they officially signed, Jared Davis, the linebacker from Detroit, spent 4 seasons there, was a former first-round pick of the Detroit Lions, and comes over here to the New York Jets on a 1-year deal where we at the time that we signed him, you and I thought that, hey, is Jared Davis going to be the Mike? You don't think he can really play Will. And when we really looked at how this Sam linebacker is built in this Pete Carroll, Robert Saleh type defense, they're built like Jared Davis. Think like a KJ Wright, a Dre Greenlaw who we saw in San Francisco. These guys are guys that have the ability to line up on the tight end, whoop their butt in the run game, scrape over the top, make some tackles, but also, if need be, these guys can make impacts as blitzers. And so Jared Davis, he had a career high 6 sacks in his second season in the league. He's got 10.5 sacks in his career. I think this is a guy that can definitely be capable of playing this Sam role for the New York Jets here. Frank, what are your thoughts on Jared Davis?
Yeah, well, when you look at the last time the Jets played the 4-3 defense, you probably got to go back to Bill Parcells' outgrow time. Once Eric Mangini got in here, they went to that 3-4 defense. But when I look at Jared Davis, I see a lot of Mo Lewis, the guy that just wants to knock guys out. Like that's what he does. And when he spoke to the media, he talked about how he contemplated retirement because of Detroit trying to play him in that 3-4, and I just don't think he's that type of linebacker. You have to be a certain type of linebacker to play in that 3-4 defense. We've seen it for years here, but
Were you done? Yeah, go ahead.
But when you talk about Jared Davis, he fills those gaps well. He formed tackles well. He does all the little things that you want as a defensive linebacker to do. Besides, maybe he doesn't cover as well, and receivers coming out of the backfield, that could be a concern. But maybe they switch it up where CJ is going to be covering those guys on those pass situations. We don't know what this defense is going to look like.
Yeah, again, I don't expect Jared Davis to be getting a lot of hard coverage assignments, and I think that's where he struggles. And I think that's really why we saw him struggle as a 34 inside linebacker, because when you do play that 34 inside linebacker, you are going to be asked to cover. You are going to be asked to run receivers down either the middle of the field or in the flat area. And so I think that, know that being something that he struggled with, and coming over here to play Sam, and will be asked to be in those situations maybe less, and we'll be just run forward and go get him. And I think we won't see him on third downs, because it just, in my mind, it just doesn't make sense that unless he's on the field as a blitzer, it does not make sense in my mind to have Jared Davis on the field in third down or obvious passing situations. And so I think it could be game plan depending on how we see him utilized in these games. But I'm definitely excited for this linebacking group as a whole. And so, this next spot here at the will linebacker position, that's the one that's probably a little bit harder to pinpoint who the guy could be. Blake Cashman is the guy that we all expected to be, and he's gotten the first crack at the position. The third-year linebacker, the former Mike McCagnon pick, comes in. He was a questionable fit for the 3-4 defense at 6 foot, 237 pounds. He was, looked a little undersized, but he's got crazy speed. I think he ran 4.5 in the 40 at the combine. And so, by the way, you skipped like a decade, or you skipped like an era between Parcells and Mangini, and you forgot about Herm. He was a 4.3 guy. But anyway, Blake Cashman, he's got, obviously he's known for his speed, but he's also known for his inability to stay on the field. And so that's already shown its reared its ugly head through mini camp and OTAs, and now training camp, to the point where Hamza Nasruddin, 6th round pick of the New York Jets, former college safety, is coming in here to play weak side linebacker for the Jets, and has already gotten the first shot at these first team reps that have been vacated by Blake Cashman. And so he's a player that is exciting, kind of reminds the fan base a little bit Bryce Hall in terms of, hey, here's an injured player that was talented, probably could have gone in the first 3 rounds prior to being injured, but because of the injury, the Jets are getting them in the 5th or 6th round. And so I think obviously there's a ton of excitement and intrigue with Nasruddin, but as with rookies, we're always excited with rookies because they're the new thing that we'd never seen, and their potential is unlimited because we haven't seen their floors yet. And so, Frank, I ask you, how do you see this linebacker competition between Blake Cashman and Hamza Nasruddin breaking down?
Oh, we love rookies because it's the unknown, right? And I think Blake Cashman's still an unknown. Can he stay on the field? I think if he could stay healthy, I think this is going to be his position because I think he fits this linebacking core perfect. You know, he's got the speed. He's a little bit thicker. He's really good in coverage. He hits like an animal. And then, you know, like we were talking about in passing situations, you could pull Jared Davis and stick Nas in there, and now you got 3 linebackers that could cover pretty darn well, and it's going to be tough sledding for them to sneak those passes in on those 3.
Yeah, I mean, I have a little bit of concerns with Cashman's ability to cover, just because I mean he's a fast guy, he's somewhat athletic, but doesn't necessarily mean he's a great cover guy. He could probably drop in short zones and things like that. But Hamza Nasruddin is the guy. I think if you want someone running with the tight end, you want them running, hey, oh shoot, this guy just got matched up with a slot receiver. That's a guy that I would probably be okay with doing that, because he has experience having played deep safety in college, has experience playing in the slot, and so to me, I'm kind of hoping and banking on Hamza Nasruddin winning this. I mean, we're just gonna call him Nas, but I'm banking on Nas winning this job, winning this outside linebacker position, and I think to me he kind of makes the perfect fit in here. And Blake Cashman has not been able to stay healthy. I mean, you know, 3 years in the league, and he's got 100% probability of missing time with injuries. And so, you know, I'm just kind of gonna bet on the youth and the upside here with Nas.
Yeah, you kind of have to, right? Until proven else with Blake, you know, he regardless, you know, if he could stay healthy, he'd be an excellent special teams contributor. You know,
Absolutely.
and maybe that's what you do. You start Nas and try to keep Blake healthy by being an excellent special teams player. I don't know. That might be the way to go.
Yeah, maybe. And then maybe he's your depth signing, like you said, sub package player, where you get Jared Davis out there. You want to put a little bit more speed, so you put Cashman out there and Nas in similar sets. Or you could go to the other rookie safety, former safety, now linebacker, Jamie and Sherwood. You know, it's interesting because Nas gets so much love, and I'm guilty of it myself. But Jamie Sherwood was drafted around earlier, so that just kind of tells you in the Jets' minds what they thought of both of these players prior to selecting them. And who knows if maybe they had Nas as a higher player, but they, you'd have to imagine that they had him as a higher player, but they probably felt a certain way about the injury. And then when they had him like late in the draft, and they're like, oh well, I can't believe this guy is still here. Because if they could have just taken him with the Jamie and Sherwood pick, but there's a reason why they took Sherwood and they didn't take Nas, because they could have had him either one of these guys, but they end up getting both. So Sherwood, to me, it's interesting because it's like, where does he fit? But for some reason, I mean, I've been getting a lot of, some not whispers, I don't want to call them whispers, but there were some reports out of Jets camp that he's been working some as the Mike linebacker as well. So that's interesting there, that he's working not just as the Will, but also working as the Mike. So what are your thoughts there, Frank, about Sherwood and what his potential impact could be in 2021?
Well, I think in 2021 he's going to be a special team standout for Brant Boyer. I think that first things first. And when we drafted him, that's what I thought. I thought he was going to be the heir apparent to CJ. Like he just looks like a Mike linebacker. When you put on the tape and you see how he fights through those blocks, how he runs sideline to sideline. He doesn't really look like a Will or Sam, kind of like Nas does or Blake does. He just, to me, anyways, he looks like your traditional Mike linebacker in that 4-3 defense.
Yeah, and who knows? We saw Robert Saleh do it with Fred Warner, who was a former college, I guess, essentially a nickel, basically at BYU, and has become has become the highest paid middle linebacker in football. And so he was a 3rd-round pick out of BYU to the Niners. And so Robert Saleh knows the recipe here. I think that he's got the players in place to try to do a similar thing. Not saying obviously that these guys are going to end up as the same caliber level of players of Fred Warner, but the juice is here. And Jared Davis had talked about it, that, hey, this is really smart for this organization to do this, and he thinks that both of these players, Sherwood and Nas, are going to be great players for the Jets for years to come.
Yeah, we just got to hope that this draft that Joe Douglas had pans out. It looks like they got the players, across the board, but, they got to prove it on the field.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Frank, I think that's all the LBs we've got to talk about. I mean, the beauty of being a 3-4 or 4, going from a 3-4 to a 4-3 is that we don't have all these linebackers to talk about. There's probably only going to be like 5 or 6 that make the roster. So, or the game day roster, I should say. But I mean, until next time, I mean, we'll be talking about the DBs. That'll be fun. Obviously, we know Marcus May's back in the building, so that'll be exciting to talk about, and his impact, and what all these other guys could be doing in the corner position. There's a lot of intrigue there because we all assume it's Bryce Hall, but who's it going to be opposite him? We don't know, but you got to find out. 2 weeks. You'll find out on our next show when Frank and I are back here. Again, make sure you're catching us on YouTube. Make sure you catch us on social media at liftoff_NYJ for our Twitter account, and at Now We Have Liftoff NYJ on, or is it just Now We Have Liftoff on Instagram. And then in terms of our personal accounts, I'm JR Football Nerd on all social media platforms. You find me Instagram, Twitter, as well as TikTok. And Frank, we also have a TikTok. How do I forget this? What is our TikTok again, Frank? Because you're the guy running that one.
It's Now We Have Liftoff_NYJ.
Oh man, killing us. We're killing our listeners with all 3 different handles. But hey, they weren't available, so you have to bear with us. And some of them have different restrictions on the how you can how many characters you have. So please forgive us for that. But you could catch Frank at FrankieG53 on Instagram and at FrankieBots with a Z on Twitter. And everyone, we appreciate y'all. We appreciate y'all kicking it with us, and we'll catch y'all later. Peace.
Love y'all. Peace.